And one. Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a great question that is like one that we don't often think of. And so I'm excited to unpack this today. And the question really is about your branding and your marketing and your public relations. And the question really is, how strategic is it? And I know when I asked myself that, I felt like I'm not really strategic at times on, where to go with it. And I just feel like I throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks. And if you're like me, then hey, you're in the right spot. And I found the guy that asked that question. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Gal Borenstein. How are you today, my friend?
I'm very good. I look forward to our podcast.
Awesome. Well, you are founder and CEO at the Borenstein Group. So fill us in on what is going on over there.
Well, I founded the Borenstein Group, believe it or not, 3 decades ago or 30 years ago when I was making only $28,000 as a marketing assistant for a $20 million company that was in the telecommunication business, mainly business telephony, which at the time was kind of as new as a smartphone. That
Okay.
integrated voicemail and telephones together for corporate. And I was hired as a marketing assistant because the owners, who were engineers, and that is
Okay.
still true for most engineering companies in the small to middle market, didn't really see the value or truly understood what branding and marketing and PR can do for them. It was always kind of the orphan child, or the kind of what we call overhead, essentially, that you cut
Yeah.
first. When you
Right.
think about anything to cut, marketing always get cut, and that has not changed. But to the point of how it got started because of three reasons. Being in the position of being a marketing assistant and needing resources, I had small agencies, ad agencies, branding agencies, and PR agencies, and I was kind of a client. And I got to see three things that really kind of together create kind of the triangle of success, if you will, of and the trajectory for how the Borenstein Group came about. The
Okay.
first is after the first meeting, when the president came to kind of tell us about his agency. Uh, what really happened is they never showed up again because we weren't going to spend $1 million,
Sure.
more like $5,000 or $50,000. The second, they sent junior, literally a graduate from university, to say, I'm going to be your account manager,
Sure.
which meant they didn't really know much about their advertising industry. But the most important part, which was the third, is they didn't understand technology, and they didn't understand the fact that marketing technology, which is essentially marketing concepts that are very abstract and complex, and you have to try to make it into something that is usable and something that people will resonate with on the outside, where they
Sure.
don't have the opportunity to spend an hour and then understand what XYZ slash B means. So they need a name like Platin or whatever it may be.
Sure.
So seeing all the disservice, if you will, or being ignored in the kind of emerging then small to mid-sized market, which kind of flipped the economy. If you remember the days of IBM and three or four other companies that ruled 80% of the employment.
Sure. Sure.
But I saw the trend where everything is going to flip. And I said, well, what if I can create an agency that really kind of focuses on serving technology companies, and we're going to be affordable, and we're going to basically compete where no man's land is, whereby the big agencies, I tell them, well, if you want a big agencies, go ahead. But if you want the CEO to actually show up, not to the first meeting, but to actually work with you. And
Sure.
typically, I try to kind of appeal to business owners and CEOs, no matter what the size of the company. That really kind of what started the Borenstein Group.
Yeah.
So our tagline from the beginning was making creativity a science.
Sure.
which was an acknowledgement that because we work with engineers, engineers think in a linear fashion, which is the only way to produce something. If you remember, Laverne and Shirley, and you see
Hmm.
kind of those cans on the production line. If you didn't
Yep.
have that in a linear process, all those cans will or bottles will basically fall off the chain.
Sure.
But at the same time, for in marketing, you have to think about the 1% idea that will shape your brand and the client's brand in that case, and do it in a way that really focuses on how do you basically make that the point of reference, the shiny object that people
Yeah.
will look. And that's really kind of how it started. And 30 years later, our principles have not changed.
Yeah.
Uh, our company accolades went from a startup to being one of the top 500 agencies in the country and
Nice.
one of the top 50 business to business and business to government, which refers to government contractors that do a lot
Sure.
of the drones and military technology. And we're located right outside Washington, D.C. And that gives us a good market. But the initial kind of the why was all about the fact that people didn't measure anything. People thought of advertising and marketing and PR not as a strategic value, but as an asset that if it doesn't produce tomorrow, that's what gets cut.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. There's a ton there. Thanks for sharing that, Kyle. A couple things that came up kind of in my mind as you were talking is, I think there's a lot of people listening right now that are in corporate America or corporate their country, and they want to really do what you did. And they are always wondering, how do you transition from corporate to owning your own business? I like what you said was you found a disservice and you tried to fix that. And so I think that's one. If you want to, for people listening, if you want to stay in your industry, try to find the things that aren't working. Was it like immediate success for you, Gal? Was it something that like people caught on right away and caught your vision, or did it take you a while for that to kind of take off and fly?
The answer is really both, but the overwhelmingly, I would say that the key was doing a few pitches and talking about what we do, only to realize that most people thought that, especially in the small to mid-sized companies, the CEO thought that, it's too expensive. And the
Yeah,
perception of being too expensive prevented them from saying, let's try it, let's do a pilot, let's do anything. So I literally looked at the price of and the salary of a receptionist. And I said, what are you paying your receptionist? And at that
sure.
time, we're talking about 1992,
Yeah.
1994. Think about that time frame coming out of the recession of when George Bush the first was in office. And
Okay.
interestingly enough, it was $18,000. That was a good
Okay.
salary for a receptionist at the time.
Okay.
And since I was making $28,000 a year at the company that I was working for, when I kind of start going to those pitches and meetings with CEOs that I told them, what we do is work with you, with technologists, and help you
Yeah.
get the product to market so people understand it on a sixth grade level, on a fifth grade level, whatever it is
Sure.
that it takes to get to the bottom line. And my value proposition was very simple. After you heard all the strategic values that we're and delivery points that we promised to deliver, if you can't afford it, it's no good.
Yeah.
So how about you think about your receptionist salary and we'll start with a contract for $18,000. And if you see that it works in 6 months, we can revisit, see what other needs you have. And if not, fire us. Because if we're not doing the job that we think we can do, that's okay.
Yeah.
And to my surprise, because you always have to have kind of almost kind of a religious belief, which means it's an abstract that you have to believe in that you can't touch and feel, which is kind of motivation and instinct, if you will.
Sure.
But bottom line was I was really going to be happy if we had two clients in the first year, which meant I would have doubled what I was making as a
Sure.
marketing assistant.
Sure.
And at the end of the first year, we were at $150,000 because
Oh,
we had
nice.
five and sixth, and then a bunch of new projects that came along. There were not kind of annual service agreements or retainers, as they call them in our industry.
Sure.
And it really kind of took off because I believed in it and I focused on exciting people and kind of taking the energy and passing the energy to them. And, if I wrote a book about that specifically, it would be helping people turn the idea that marketing, advertising, PR, and branding, especially now in the digital age, is kind of an overhead instead of thinking about
Yeah.
it as the most important investment that you're going to make and
Sure.
continue to make. That's the whole ball of wax, if you will.
Yeah, and that's awesome for sharing that. I feel like too expensive is probably something you hear a lot, and it doesn't necessarily mean too expensive. It's just too expensive for me, or I'm not seeing the value of this 10,000 or $20,000 campaign or whatever it costs. How do you combat that for the average business owner, entrepreneur listening right now, Gal? Because that's probably what's going in their mind. And like you said, as soon as there's a shift in the economy, as soon as there's a shift in my industry, any little dip in sales, and I see so many people bailing on their marketing efforts. So, what's your advice to them if they're listening and that's kind of their mentality that I can't afford this, I want to grow, but I want to do it in ways that I don't cost as much. Is that a blind spot that you see a lot of, first of all, that people are thinking that?
Absolutely. And the most important gap that I see is that people jump into advertising and marketing and PR without really have a solid foundation that is confident, that is collaborative, that is transparent, and basically have a brand that is trusted in the marketplace. So by the time they spend the money, it's really too late. And you're spending the money on stuff that you should have spent the money a long time ago. But then again, we have a completely new economy where anyone, literally from their bedroom or from their warehouse office, all the
Sure.
way to being in a leased office in a nice building, where your focus should be how do you create value? How do you differentiate yourself? And then show me 5 or 10 clients that you should be able to get after being maybe a year in business
Yeah.
that are not only willing to be your reference, they're willing to be your brand ambassadors and tell people whether it's a customer testimonial, if it's um, a video testimonial, or just would you be a reference for our company because your company is
Sure.
just like my client company that I'm looking
Sure.
to impress. And that's really the strategic mistake that most small to mid-sized companies make and entrepreneurs make it. They either focus on the product, if you will, you're focusing on making your product better or your service better, but you're not
Okay.
connecting the dots to the idea that that's got to be an audience of listeners or viewers, or for that matter, of buyers, whether it's a specialty coffee shop that is much better than Starbucks, or it could be an engineering firm that specializes in cybersecurity. The rules are pretty much the same, although they're different industries. At the end of the
Sure.
day, if people don't trust the company, they are likely to be in a too late position to be turned around. And that's where you see that when money gets involved, banks give you a loan, venture capitalists invest in you. The first thing that happens if you're not the business owner, uh, who did they get rid of? The CEO.
Yeah.
And why did they get rid of the CEO, which is typically also the founder? Because they realize that it's kind of a personal jail that was created where, yes, the entrepreneurship and the idea is great, but there was no plan to brand the company behind just anything other than just doing a logo and a
Sure.
tagline. That's not going to make a difference. You can call the company Boo Boo, and it would not make a difference. And case in point, Yahoo, nobody understood what it was. Google, nobody understood what it was. It actually
Yep.
had meanings, but it was only kind of an inside joke about
Sure.
what they meant. So everything that you do in branding and marketing and public relations and now in digital, it's all about taking control of your narrative and creating a plan where you really are able to create something that is differentiated from your competition.
Yeah.
And if I may elaborate on that,
Yeah.
the single most important thing is to always look at yourself, especially when you're kind of the David of the world, you're not the Goliath, if you will,
Sure.
is to
Yep.
really think about it as I'm never going to be able to beat the IBMs and the Microsofts and the biggest cybersecurity company or the biggest bakery, but I can find a niche within that environment, and that niche could be so specific, but still has champions in the marketplace that say, I hate, K-cups, for example. And you come up with a new K-cup that is completely different in its acidity and its flavor. And you see a lot of these startups that are trying to do that.
Sure.
Um, you take that, but you build something that can say, we produce X, Y, and Z. And this is, by the way, a formula that everybody should listen to and write it down on your sticky note or mental note, if you will. The way you know that you have a brand is when you're able to say, regardless of the company, is we produce X, Y, and Z. Unlike our competitors, we do it better, faster, cheaper, whatever attribute you want to attach to it.
Sure. Okay.
That's the formula. If you're unable to articulate that, you need marketing help.
Sure.
If you're not able to throw spaghetti against the wall with multiple, unlike the competition, that's how you win.
Gotcha. Well, and I think you bring up a great point, and it's interesting. So, entrepreneur listening, average business owner right now probably wouldn't go and tackle anything that a CPA would tackle. Probably definitely not doing anything that an attorney would go and do. So we have no problem hiring a CPA. We have no problem hiring an attorney. But the marketing thing, Gal, it feels like, well, I can do that myself. I'm kind of creative. I know how, I know this Canva or I know this, whatever it is. And do you feel like a lot of people look at marketing as if I build it, they will come type of thing, the field of dreams, where it doesn't really matter my message. I have something, and I just put it out to the world. It just feels like marketing is like something I can do myself, like marketing 101 I can do on nights and weekends. Do you see that a lot around in your travels around the country?
Absolutely. I think a prerequisite to owning a company, starting a company, building a company, if you're kind of the owner or the CEO or the entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, is you got to have an inherent, almost religious belief, as I said before,
Yeah,
that the abstract that says, I'm going to make $1 million in the first year or $10 in the first year will happen because everyone around you, your banker, your CPA, your investors, your family, will surround you with no's and you're crazy and negative energy that
yep,
isn't necessarily done in a mean way or for a mean kind of destructive strategy. It
sure,
really is to give you some reality checks. And because they never tried it and never been successful, they assume, well, you're part of our lifeline, if you're in or bloodline, then
sure,
everybody was union, so you can't be an entrepreneur.
right,
And it's quite the opposite. Be the first. Dare to take risks, but all
Sure.
those risks, you can mitigate 90% of the risk of spending money in the wrong places by starting by saying, this is what we do. And especially if it's a product, perfecting your product, testing it as
Yep.
much as you can to a point where you get kind of eights and nines and tens in terms of how much people like it. And it shouldn't
Sure.
be your family that tells you how much they like it either, because
Right.
they're not going to give you the constructive criticism that you need to have in order to build something. And if it's a service, what is the service that you're offering? And what, again, are you differentiating about it that would make sense?
Yeah.
People don't do that in my experience, as much as they should. They just
Sure.
go on Dun and Bradstreet or ChatGPT now, and they say, "Well, how many people are selling this new popular shirt?"
Yeah.
And it says, "Well, 3 million people are buying shirts from J. Crew and other brands." And that's really the business plan. The business plan is to sell more shirts.
Sure.
And that's where you know that you failed, or somebody else should be your friend and tell you it's not enough. The
Yeah.
shirt that you're selling could be in the same line of business as the other brands where you might want to go and buy a shirt. But your shirt has to be unique, whether it's a feature, whether it's a nuance. And by the way, a good example for everybody to kind of relate to is really kind of the shirts that are kind of what we call business casual, that have a little tag at the bottom, uh, that have become an empire because they basically took that problem of knowing that people don't like to tuck their shirt into their
Sure.
pants
Yep.
when they're going out on a date or they're going out with their family or when it's casual business in the office,
Sure.
and you really don't have to, that's not the culture of that company.
Right.
So Untuck It is a exactly an example of smart entrepreneurs that were able to say, we're going to create a kind of a form factor for the dress shirt
Yeah.
that would have something that you'll be able to wear with jeans. And guess what? 5 or 6 or 7 more years in business, they're the number one brand, and their shirts still cost $80 and $90, which also define who they're going after. They're not
Sure.
going after somebody who's potentially buying just at kind of Walmart or Target or wherever you can get a quality
Right.
shirt,
Sure.
but it doesn't have that little thing at the bottom. So
Sure.
Untuck It created an audience that nobody believed will pay $80 for a shirt, because if you're in the middle class, I don't think many people have that money to spend, especially when you
Sure.
need 3 or 5 shirts a week, right?
Yeah.
And if
No,
you
absolutely.
do, you would you think about it as kind of a nuclear cockroach that will survive for the next 5 years, and you know that doesn't work. You put it in the laundry, the shirt shrinks. There's no magic in that. But
Sure.
you're buying a status. You have an expensive shirt, you have a unique look, and it's
Yeah.
just another shirt. The only difference is that convenience factor for corporate workers that went from this is what we do to here's how we basically grow it. And then by
Yeah.
trial and tribulations, they got there. Uh,
Well,
that's a really kind of a good example, because when
sure.
I never think that a shirt could go from an average cost of $40, when you even think about the starting of a high-end shirt, to
Yeah.
$80 and $120. And most importantly, everyone is trying to copy them.
Right.
Now there are multiple brands. They can't use the Untuckit brand name,
Yeah.
but they're calling it tuckless shirt and whatever.
Well, and I think there's probably a lot of people listening here, Gal, that are too close to what they're doing. And so it's really hard to, get a constructive view of how to market this, of how to niche that, what do I do that nobody else does? That's a hard question. here in the Midwest, back in the day, there was a airline called Midwest Express that was owned by Kimberly Clark, and Kimberly Clark's a big, huge paper company, and they were flying around the Midwest with these big planes, and they were flying their team around and realizing that three-quarters of the seats were empty. And so they're like, why don't we just, fill these up? We're going from Milwaukee to Kansas City anyway. We'll just see if anybody wants to buy it. And, they were so unique. They had two cross leather seating, all seats. So everything was first class. Pre 9/11, they had really nice meals, and they had, glass with wine. And I mean, it was just such a better experience. And then about 15 minutes before they landed, you're sitting there enjoying your day, and then you smelled something, and I'm like, boy, it smells like they're chocolate chip cookies. And sure enough, they're baking chocolate chip cookies on the plane, and giving you one as you're landing, and like it was just perfect. So when we talk about marketing, I'm always like, what's your cookie? What are you doing that nobody else does? That's a really hard question to ask. Is that where your group then comes in, Gal, to kind of help if I'm listening and I don't know
Yes.
what I do that nobody else does? Do you help us with that?
Yes. So my agency and any agency that is worth a penny or a dime or a Bitcoin right now
Sure.
start the process by asking the client before you become really our client, what is unique about what you just described as the innovation to whatever market that you're going after. And we focus a lot
Sure.
on innovations in technology, but it doesn't really fundamentally change the fact that if you don't know what your differentiation is, the first thing that we have to do as an agency is be kind of the external voice of the prospects. We would interview existing customers of yours.
Okay.
We would then compare them to what people on the outside that have bought your product are actually saying. What we often find in this stage, which goes before the go-to-market plan, is that what you think people are buying from you and what people are actually buying from you could be 1,000 miles apart from each other. Imagine
Got it.
that your company and you as kind of the entrepreneur think that people are buying it because you have the best, let's say, cybersecurity software in a niche industry that protects laundromats. I'm just making it up. Um, the bottom line is, if the customers say we bought it because it's the cheapest system out there and doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, but it does the job, you have a
Sure.
complete disconnect between what you think that people are buying versus what they're buying. And once we know that, it becomes kind of a benchmark to say, here are the things that we need to work on. Let's do the market research to see who are really your competitors. The most common answer that I get, which drives me nuts after doing it for 30 years and thinking that there are enough books out there and enough knowledge and enough Shark Tank type of shows that people
Yeah.
should be able to get that answer from. But what it is how do you do something without knowing who your competitors are, and how do you basically bring it down to a niche? Because when somebody says, who are your competitors? And your answer is, it's IBM, it's Microsoft, you already lost the game.
Sure.
Now, it does not mean that you can't reinvent the game, but you probably spent a lot of money on stuff that wouldn't have made a difference. So
Yeah.
market research on the front end, asking the right questions, surveying people that said, I hate you by not buying your product. These
Yeah.
are the people that actually are your best friends. And sometimes it's hard when you're on the side of the entrepreneurs and kind of the business owner and the CEO that
Sure.
put 60 hours a week to make that happen. But if you're not willing to listen to what the market has to say, you're going to fail. Not because your idea is not good, it's because you didn't listen. And listening does not mean there's A and a B or a 0 or a 10. You could be at a 6 in one area and be at 10 on the other.
Yeah.
Think about Amazon. It's not a small business, but the promises that they had when they started are still the same promises that keep them in business today, which is if I order something, I can return it as long as I either go to a UPS store or UPS store will come to me and pick it up.
Sure.
Uh, they eliminated the psychological problem. Well, how many people like to go to the mall and return something? That's just like abhorrent, right? It's a
Sure.
horrible experience because they're looking at you as a suspect. Did you wear it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just takes away the fun. So they
Sure.
took care of that. The second was uh, we always have inventory because they invented virtual inventory. So books, for example, when you buy a book on Amazon, not many people know that unless it's like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Bill Clinton that wrote kind of a biography, which they stock up the books. The rest are being printed as soon as you click the button,
Yeah.
and it gets to your home in 3 days as
Yeah.
a new book. All the way to the third promise, which is we're always going to uh, ask you, what is your customer experience, customer service experience? How was the driver? How was the package delivered? Was it put in the right place? These are
Sure.
all customer experience modules that every company should follow. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a million items. It could be 6 items. It could be just the pizza in your
Sure.
pizza parlor that you're setting.
Well, and I think that we're going to take a break here. When we come back, I want to kind of unpack the trust piece because I think that this trust is one thing that you might be able to hang your hat on as, something that, if you're looking for a niche or you're looking for something that nobody else does, maybe, trust becomes that opportunity. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Gal Borenstein. We are talking about marketing, branding, public relations. How strategic are you with it? I'm guessing if you're like me and you're listening, most of the time it's kind of funny. Like you see something somewhere, wherever on TV or on LinkedIn or wherever, you're like, oh, I should try that, and it was like 5 minutes ago. It wasn't even on your radar, and so I'm assuming you get a lot of people that are just trying stuff like we talked about before. How does trust enter into this? Because I feel like, it seems foundational, it seems like it's automatic, but back in the day, whatever, a couple hundred years ago, whatever, there was a general store and you walked in and everything was there, and you probably had a pretty good trust and a relationship with that store owner. But now, like you were talking about with Amazon and all these different electronic opportunities, you never talk to anybody. I mean, I can buy stuff now until I'm blue in the face and I don't talk to anybody. I'd much rather talk to people. But how in the world does a small business, like kind of introduce trust into their daily activity when it comes to their marketing?
Well, the first kind of principle that I want people to think about is, as you said, trust has evolved over
Right.
time.
Okay.
And uh, typically, trust was kind of a transactional trust where you go into, let's say, that Sam Drucker's general store on Green Acres, for those of you who weren't alive. That was kind of the community center, if you will, where everything for a small town, he had it. And
Sure.
that fictional character was not that fictional because that was small town America and Main Street, if you will, which was very short street. But fast forward to enabling technologies that started with emails, that started with fax machines, and kind of progressed all the way to having AI agents in your CRM, your customer relationship management, that are actually, doing a survey, and immediately when you buy, you get a questionnaire, and it says, "How did we do today?" Uh, Trust has to be your brand, not just differentiation, but whatever promise that you decided to make to the marketplace, whatever is your narrative that says we are better than the other companies because we do this and that. Now, what you need to build is a system of proof points that what you're actually promising is what you are delivering. And so many companies with great ideas fall short of success. And in the September to October to November, where the bank might be calling you a loan if you started in January. And the answer is they don't trust you as a company because you don't have, for example, a digital footprint. You go to a website of an average small company, and many times you find that there's not even a customer testimonial. There's no press release from this century. Recently, I had the kind of opportunity, if you will, which
Okay.
I didn't enjoy, to tell CEO, hey, you have a great, rich content, but I went to your press release room where you put all the new things that you do that you told
Yeah.
me about. And the last release was from 2019 in 2026. And I
Wow.
said, why would somebody trust a company that looks like they haven't evolved, they haven't kind of adjusted themselves to the
Sure.
new digital world? So
Sure.
trust is not a side item. Trust is the values that you bring to the table and then testing it to make sure that that's what people are buying. And they buy more when they trust you more. And certainly there's an evolution of technology. The biggest concern that I write about in my book, Don't Believe the Hype, when trust is on the line in the age of digital and AI, it is about telling executives and CEOs and entrepreneurs is you have to listen to what the market has to say. That means customer reviews, product reviews, service reviews. You can't ignore Google in your neighborhood, for example, if you're
Sure.
selling pizza and say,
Yeah.
well, I'm getting good. The competition is just smearing us. Well, it's true if it's like two or three of them, but if
Sure.
you're not you're not getting good reviews or have no reviews, what are the chances that if you went with your loved one to dinner and you wanted to look for a romantic restaurant and you find a name that sounds good and the menu looks good online, and then you go to Google reviews and it has only 5 glowing reviews instead of 500 because they've been
Sure.
in the community for 2 or 3 years. And
Sure.
that's really how you think about it. And then having social media that is active, it doesn't have to be a genius version of it. It's just building a community online. Every business has the opportunity to do that. It's the and least costliest strategy that you can use. And what I found very often that people neglect it or hire an intern to do it instead of hiring maybe a part-time uh, marketing assistant that may not be working right now, which could be a perfect win-win because you're not spending
Sure.
as much as you need to, or
Sure.
as more than you need to, but you're still making somebody happy by giving them something to do. And you bootstrap it. But it all comes back to the promise that we make. Do we keep it when it
Yeah.
goes to the marketplace? So you can't say I have the best pizza if you don't have the best pizza because people will call you on it.
Sure.
And trust, that's the trust with your consumers or your customers. But the other trust that I talk about in the book and is very much part of the kind of audit, if you will, that you need to do in your
Okay.
business is the internal belief. I remember distinctly an HVAC company that came to our office to fix, the cooling system when it was really hot during the summer. It
Sure.
was over a decade ago, but it's still very vivid in my mind, where the company had a pretty good reputation. So we called that company, and two technicians showed up.
Sure.
And the technicians start talking to each other as they're fixing the cooling system. about their company, and they start trashing their company,
Oh boy.
thinking nobody was listening.
Yeah.
Or my boss is an idiot. We're not getting all the parts.
Yeah.
I don't know how I can work in a place like that. And the other guy says, well, I got to pay my mortgage. Now, imagine if you extrapolated into a population of unhappy employees, whether
Yeah.
it's a car manufacturing facility or a donut shop.
Sure.
And you go into a donut shop or to a coffee shop, and your barista um, basically looks at you like you're crazy
Yeah.
or doesn't smile at all.
Sure.
That's really what internal belief means. You're not carrying if you don't have values that carry from the inside to the outside, you don't have a good corporate culture. And a very good example that I'll mention is I can see within 30 seconds when I ask people when we're going to do an evaluation about what should be your marketing strategy and
Yeah.
differentiation. And I ask people in middle management or the staff or the factory workers, whatever it may be, and ask them, what are your corporate values? And they kind of scratch their head or say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or our CEO says that it's integrity, innovation,
Sure.
and being friendly to the environment,
Yeah.
which might be part of the operation overall, but they don't believe in it. They'll never tell that to anybody on the outside. And
Yeah.
that not only hurts your business, it hurts your recruitment. Because when people are looking up on Glassdoor, for example, they want to see what somebody who works there is saying about the company.
Sure.
And people that get fired, what did they say about the company? All these things become your brand. And in the digital age, and with the addition of AI, which now allows you to uh, write an email and send it to 10,000 people and 100,000 people and 1 million people with one click,
Yeah.
you would think that that solves the problem. It
Yeah.
actually accelerates the problem because you haven't solved the issue of your internal culture first and agree
Yeah.
on the values. And then it becomes a bad customer experience, which leads to less sales.
Wow. Well, and I'm pretty sure that most people listening, there's another big blind spot that everybody in my team trusts me and is engaged. We do a lot of speaking around the country on employee engagement, and I mean, um, the research shows, like Gallup says 1 in 3 people show up every day in their job engaged, which means 2 out of 3 don't. Obviously those two guys probably that showed up at your place were not really engaged in that company, and look at what that does. And so my question is, should we really start looking internal first for that trust and build that internal before we actually go to market, or do we go to market first? What's your take on that situation there, Gal?
The strategic process that should be the model that everyone uses is you come up with an idea, you sell the idea, so you create an opportunity, pardon me,
Hmm.
you create an opportunity in a product. You test the product, you go from alpha to beta, and then you get some feedback. Now you have to hire employees and you have to tell the employees what this is all about and what's the aspiration, whether
Sure.
it's we want the next Starbucks or the next Untucked shirt or the next cybersecurity that nobody can hack, whatever it has to be.
Sure.
First, make sure that your employees believe it and have proof points for them to show this really works and have them test your product. Because if they go out with not having that belief in place and the values that the company stands for, which one of them universally should be, we take care of our own. We
Yeah.
really take care of our employees. We do things that make it fun to work hard. All these different things should happen way before you start marketing.
Sure.
Because when you hire the salespeople and the business developers, they're hunters, and their job is to hunt from 100 feet away or
Yeah.
500 feet away with uh, a shotgun and being a sniper. What if they're looking for the right target or the wrong target? It
Right.
has everything to do with what you trained them to do. So it's nice if they bring an elk to your office, right, for as a kind of a prize
Yeah.
uh, for taking down the elk. But what if the elk is a customer that is not your real customer? They
Yeah.
just bought it because of a promise made, but then you can't deliver.
Sure.
Only then you're able to delegate customer service and build a customer experience. And until you know that your customer experience in your design process and you've tested it, even with 50 uh, potential customers, uh, you really don't have a brand. What you have is, I think I have a brand. And then if it goes to market and the business developers are basically believing that that promise is something that they can keep,
Hmm.
uh, then they get bad feedback. What do you think happens? They go back to the company and shut down and start basically only going by the script that the boss gave them,
Sure.
which kills the trust. So
Sure.
it's really important to think about the company as an organism. And in that organism, not everything is going to be perfect. And again, to be clear, I'm not advocating that when whoever is your marketing consultant, or for that matter, if you are your own consultant, uh, it's not all going to be 10, but whatever it's going to be has to be connected to progressive uh, motion where you can see things improving because you benchmarked it from the beginning. So maybe we're at 3 at name recognition when we launch, but later we become an 8. And then
Hmm.
we compare ourselves with other companies and say, how do we get to 10? How do we get to
Sure.
12 out of 10?
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. There's so much here, Gala. We could talk about this all day. Two questions that I want to let you go as we start to land the plane. What would your tip of the day be today for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered already that you want to reiterate. Maybe it's something we haven't shared yet. But what would your tip of the day be today?
My tip of the day is as technology is taking over a lot of jobs that used to be kind of the bastion of knowledge in companies, uh, don't rush into implementing AI without knowing what the questions and the knowledge about the company that you have has been taught to the AI agent. So an AI agent could be a CRM or your Salesforce or whatever it may be.
Okay.
So we're doing it backwards as you hire and implement AI and then teaching AI how to do things while you already launched it. And it's too expensive to experiment if you're a small company. And
Yeah.
the second one, the other side of the coin, is the people that we always say, don't surround yourself with negative people. But at the same time, if you have negative customers, obviously somebody is going to be an a-hole and shouldn't
Yeah.
be your customer. But the average customer that gave you a bad review is the best opportunity that you have to have a conversation, to buy them coffee,
Yeah.
to do a Zoom call, whatever it may be, because they're going to give you the real information that you're missing and that blind spot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm hoping for people listening that if you have an unhappy customer, if you have a bad review, look at that as a gift rather than a curse because, when everybody's saying, oh, this is awesome, it's really, I don't know about listeners and I don't know about you, Gal, but when someone says, I'm doing a great job, I don't really feel the need to change anything and improve and, grow. Whereas when somebody, when I speak around the country and I get a bunch of fives and then I get a four, I like focus on that four. I don't know why that's probably just human nature, but it's like, think about something like Gal said is that today's tip is maybe somebody isn't in love with your company. What a great place to be, to learn more and to grow. So fantastic information there. Remember, the newest book that Gal's written is Don't Believe the Hype When Trust is on the Line. You can get that at Amazon. And for somebody listening right now that we sparked up something that they want to kind of continue this conversation with you, what's the best way, Gal, for people to connect with you?
The easiest way is to really go to LinkedIn and type Gal Borenstein and invite me to your network and send me a message. And that is a courtesy offering that I'm making to your listeners. Know that if you have a question, go there and kind of hit me up and uh, send me a message and saying, we listened to your show and we have some issues that we need to deal with. What's the best way to kind of start it? There's no selling involved. There's just knowledge exchange is doing my part to the community of marketers. And
Awesome.
you can also, of course, visit borensteingroup.com and see some of the uh, solutions that we offer. And then if something looks like something that you need to work on, contact us online via the form that we have, and we will follow up with you. And in fact, one of our hallmarks of customer service is it doesn't matter if you're a client or not, you're getting a response within 4 hours, not
Nice.
12 hours, not 16 hours, not 24 hours, even if
Sure.
it's 5 p.m. at night, because
Wow.
that's something that people appreciate and
Sure.
is recent, literally as recent as last week. We won a bid with a client. And the first comment that the client made was, I'm still waiting for the proposal from the other companies that
Oh,
didn't
no.
respond even to my initial request. And you guys were
Sure.
there within less than an
Yeah.
hour. And because of that, I'm giving you the business.
Awesome. Well, time kills deals. We all know that if you're in and you spend any time in sales. And for the person listening, rather than jump into your next podcast or your next activity, just kind of, sit with what Gal talked about today and, think about how strategic is your branding? How strategic is your marketing? Do you have that thought that everything marketing is too expensive, so I'm going to do it myself? Whatever we talked about today, I just want to make sure that you're spot on with everything. If you're struggling with something, that's why we do this every week. And Gal would love to have a conversation with you. Again, as we talk about all the time, it's great to have an outside source look at it because to you, everything looks great. And then you ask somebody on the outside and there might be a blind spot that you have on your marketing. So again, avail yourself and connect with Gal on LinkedIn. Gal, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This was awesome. I appreciate the strategic side of branding, marketing, and the public relations. And hopefully now we have one less person in this world that's going to just throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks. They're going to be more intentional about it. They're going to call you, and hopefully you'll be able to help them. So again, thank you for everything that you're doing, and I will continue to learn from you guys.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the show. And again, I want to reiterate that the listeners to your podcast will get a response. So take it seriously. If you have a problem, you can reach out, courtesy, discussion, and that's the value of listening to your podcast.
Awesome. Within 4 hours, too. If he doesn't do it, you guys call me because then he's going to owe
Call,
me something. So,
absolutely. Hit me over the head.
yes, exactly. Well, thanks, Gal. Have a great day.